Good morning. I'm Carlos Phillips, President and CEO at the Greenville Chamber. I want to thank you for joining us this morning for our Community Matters series. We host these webinars each week to connect you with local, state, and national leaders. You can find past recordings as well. You can find past recordings as well as the upcoming schedule at www.greenvillechamber.org. Let's take care of a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees should be on mute, so please make sure that your microphone is muted. And you'll have the opportunity to submit questions through the chat feature throughout today's webcast, so feel free sharing your questions. Now on with the show. We know that questions remain about PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. Joining us this morning to help answer some of these questions are Stacy Brandon, the Upstate Market President at Bank of America NA, and Tammie Hawkins, CEO at CommunityWorks, Carolina. Stacy and Tammie, good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Carlos.
Good morning.
Glad to be here.
Good. I'm going to kick off today's webcast with a story that I saw recently. WSPA recently ran a story about PPP and how minority, women-owned, and small businesses have had challenges accessing the provisions from the CARES Act. So it's a big deal, certainly top of mind at the Chamber. Want to get your thoughts on this, but let's start with the basics first. Stacy, can you help us understand what the Ppp loan is designed to do?
Sure, thanks, Carlos. Well, the PPP program was part of the CARES Act that everybody remembers. We got the $1,200 stimulus payment, and it was all designed to help keep the economy afloat while the pandemic was getting widespread across the country. And the PPP program is through the Small Business Administration, and it's a forgivable loan program that's designed so that small businesses of really up to 500 employees have a way to make payroll for 8 weeks during the pandemic. And the basic rules are, you can get a 1% interest loan from a bank, and 75% of the loan proceeds are going to go towards making payroll for you keeping your people employed. And then the other 25% can be used for utilities, rent payments, mortgage interest, so that the business can keep going in spite of the pandemic. And that's an 8-week cover, covering your expenses for about 8 weeks in time. And it's just like a lot of programs, it's kind of complicated. And it's evolved over time, but it started out at $350 billion. That money was gone really quickly. They authorized another $370 billion several weeks ago, and that money has not gone as quickly. And right now it looks like, according to their website, there's probably about $200 billion still out there for small businesses to access to help stay afloat during the pandemic. Did that help, Carlos? Did that answer your question?
That was very helpful. Now, did you say 200 billion with a B?
With a B, yes. And, it's not surprising. I think, the first 350 billion, everybody raced to get in there. And I think a lot of larger businesses were more successful just because they had an accounting staff could get the data together and get it in. And what we've seen over time is the average loan amount has continued to go down because small businesses are getting in there and getting their hand into the federal money. So yes, there is plenty of money left, and it's out there for businesses that need it.
Well, Stacy, I was always confused a bit that the companies as large as 500 employees were considered small. So I'm still dealing with that. But it's good to know that so much of that second tranche of funds remains available for businesses to access.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, in our neck of the woods, we got a lot of BMW suppliers or tier twos, and they might have 200 or 300 employees, but they were shut down for 4 or 5 weeks and are just now starting to trend backwards. So yeah, so we've got 500 is a lot of employees, but then a lot of, they're living on razor's edge too sometimes, and they might need the help.
Agreed. But I'll tell you, the businesses that seem to have been most challenged in securing these funds are those businesses with 50 employees or fewer.
Yes.
And so that's a real challenge out there. Tammie, what are some of the key points a business owner should take into consideration when determining whether or not to apply for these Payroll Protection Program funds?
Yeah, Carlos, thanks for the question. I'm glad to be here with you guys today and with Stacy. At CommunityWorks, we've had a lot of our coaches working with small businesses, and one of the number one things that we're trying to get from the businesses when they are applying or making a decision to apply is if they've had employees that they've had to let go and they want to try to rehire them or put them back on the payroll. Some of the challenges that we have seen with that is the fact that in many cases, the employees may not be able to return to work, maybe because they have young children at home, and so it's been difficult for them to balance both having young children at home and going to work. And obviously, a lot of the businesses were closed, like some of the restaurants and some of the salons and things like that. And and so I think that's balancing being able to actually restart the business and apply for that. But we've encouraged all of our small businesses. So, we already were working with small businesses. We had encouraged them to first try to access these federal funds. As Stacy said, it's not too complicated as long as you have your tax records and your payroll records, whether you're a sole proprietor and file a Schedule C, or you have quarterly, you can use your quarterly payrolls, your 941s and such. So it's not that difficult as long as you have the paperwork necessary.
Well, I think that is one of the big misconceptions about the PPP loan process, is that it does require a lot of work and a lot of information, and that it's a bit cumbersome.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the challenge is maybe folks haven't done their taxes yet, so they're trying to quickly put their taxes together and get their payroll numbers together, and then, as Stacy said, just doing the calculation. 75% of the funds need to go towards payroll, either rehiring or hiring, and then the remainder can also be used for utilities as well as your mortgage interest. As well as rent. And so that could be a resource that businesses can access, not only for the employees, but for those uses as well.
Got it. And Tammie, while the conversation about PPP loan access or funds access is quite interesting, those birds in the background really make for a great conversation about this topic.
Thank you. Having a little bit of song back here, which is nice. It is the benefit, right? Everyone on the phone for being able to Zoom from anywhere.
Exactly. It sounds beautiful, very calming. Thanks for inviting the birds. Now, Tammie, many people want to know who can help me navigate this maze. So can you give us an overview of the services provided by CommunityWorks?
Absolutely. So again, we are a PPP lender. And so as a nonprofit community development financial institution, we are an SBA lender. So once we learned, as Stacy mentioned, the second round of funding was available, we had our coaches, we've got technical assistants and business coaches that are working one-on-one with the small businesses to fill out the application, to determine, to your point, Carlos, which is the best program for them to apply for, whether it's the EIDL, which was another economic disaster recovery loan, and then again, how to maneuver to the paperwork. Because the other piece of this is being able to get the loan forgiven, which I know we're going to touch on here in a minute. And so our coaches will work with them. If we're not able to do the loan, we'll work with our banking partners like Stacy or others to refer them. Sometimes the loans are larger than maybe we can provide, but on average, as Stacy mentioned, the businesses we're helping are just a handful of employees. Our average loan is around $15,000 for our small businesses, so we can usually work with them pretty quickly.
Okay. Good. And I am so thankful for CommunityWorks and the guidance and the assistance that you provide for businesses here throughout our community. Valuable resources there. Now, one key area of the CARES Act and the PPP program that brings about a lot of questions, and that is the forgiveness component. I hear that some businesses, there's heightened concern, or there's just a lack of understanding of what is forgivable and what is not forgivable with the PPP fund. So Stacy, can you help us better understand the forgiveness component of the PPP program?
I'll give it a whirl here, Carlos, because it's actually, there is guidance, and I would tell everybody that the SBA has a really robust website about the PPP program, a lot of question and answers, how to calculate how much your loan amount is. It's out there for you, but right now they have put out rules about the forgiveness, but there is talk on Capitol Hill that may change some. This program has evolved over time, so this is what we know right now. When you apply for the loan, the way you come up with your loan amount is you look at how much your payroll was in 2019, and you divide it by 12 to get 1 month's payroll, and then you multiply that times 2.5, and that's basically how much your loan amount can be. Then once you've got your loan, you have that money to spend for 8 weeks to cover your payroll, basically. And at the end of that 8 weeks, that's what's called the forgiveness period. And you're going to, as a business owner, you're going to do some calculations once again about how much your payroll was versus that estimate of payroll. And as long as it's not more than 75%, that part is probably forgivable. And then you can add into that how much you paid your utilities during that 8-week period, and then how much you paid your rent during that 8-week period up to the amount of that loan. So, so let's just say that, you had a $100,000 loan, and I'm just going to use that number because it's easy to work with. 75% of that would be $75,000 for payroll, and then you got that $25,000 that you could use towards those other expenses. And let's just say that you were able to get everybody back to work, and you got to use up the whole 75, and you had another 20,000 of rent and utilities. That leaves you that. So that means you're going to get forgiven the 95,000. It's going to leave $5,000 left over, and you're like, well, what do I do about that? I still owe that money back to the bank, right? How does that work? Well, the way that works is you have two choices. You can go ahead and just pay that $5,000 back right then and there, or you can take that $5,000 and you can pay it back over 24 months at 1% interest, which is pretty affordable financing. And so it's going to require a little calculation. They, of course, has a form you have to attest to certain things, but it's basically that 8-week period and whether or not you were able to employ your folks and get them back to work during that time period. Does that help, Carlos?
It doesn't help me, Stacy. I don't think I ever passed a math class, but hopefully it helps some of the folks who are listening to the webcast today.
Yeah, it's out on their website, and I think all of us are getting ready to learn really quickly how that works, because it's going to start happening about next week. The first loans will start hitting that 60-day time period pretty much next week.
Well, and this is where having wise counsel, getting help from wise counsel and professionals can be of value as well.
That's right.
Yeah, I think you're right, Carlos. I think what we've seen is long as people can have the time to, collect their payroll, as Stacy was saying, and we've even encouraged folks to maybe set up a separate bank account, and working with their accountant or their CPA, and just taking that right off the top, like Stacy said, and paying that payroll. And sometimes that's just helpful to keep things separate that way. Just kind of a recommendation.
Okay, that's good to know. Now for Stacy and for Tammie, I have a question for you. So the PPP initiative has been in place now for what's about 2 months now?
April 3rd. Right? April 3rd is when the first application started.
Okay, so not quite 2 months.
That's right.
Not quite 2 months. I hear questions about, is it still worthwhile? Is it still worth the time and effort to apply? How long does the program last? So tell us a little bit about, give us some guidance there about, is it still worth my time and effort to apply for this program?
I'm not sure. Tammie, why don't you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll take that.
I'm surprised my dog hasn't barked yet, actually.
Okay, so we've had the birds and the barking, so okay. So Carlos, to your point, it's definitely worth it. I mean, I think, again, what we've been working with folks on is trying to get them access to those federal resources. And if you do follow all the rules, it will be forgiven. And to Stacy's point, even if you did want to access that capital at 1%, that's pretty good. I mean, we provide small business lending already at CommunityWorks, and as does Stacy at the banks, and very hard to get a rate at that amount. Again, I think the most important thing is feeling confident you're going to be able to bring your employees back, though. I think that's the number one thing as well, because it is for payroll. And then also possibly hiring new people. Maybe that individual that was a stylist in your salon can't return to work yet, but you could hire someone new. So again, it's a one-for-one job replacement there. So I think it's worth going through the process. I know we're going to share some information after this call with folks on our website, and as Stacy said, the SBA website, and we've got a little tutorial, a little 11-minute video that you can watch that can help people walk through the process. So I think it's worth looking into as a resource. We may not see this type of resource for small businesses for any further, we don't know if it's going to be a round 4 of stimulus funds or what is going to happen. So I would definitely at least try.
And Carlos, I would just add, when you think about South Carolina and how we've started gradually reopening everything, in a lot of cases, this is probably the right time for companies to apply, or small businesses that have been closed, whether it's a restaurant or a barber shop, or because they haven't been able to bring anybody back because they couldn't open. So this might be the right time to get in there. There's plenty of money left, and now they really are trying to reopen.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Now, speaking of hair salons and barbershops, if you are a barber or you're a hairstylist and you pay yourself, how do you apply this towards the PPP loan? So how does that work for you? If you're a sole proprietor, for example.
So sole proprietor would file a Schedule C. And so that's what they would look at to actually do the application for your PPP. Now, if you make over 100,000, it's only up to 100,000 per employee. And then you do the same calculation that Stacy did. So it's a little bit different documentation, but we've worked with a lot of sole proprietors, a lot of female-led businesses, a lot of minority businesses that are truck drivers, stylists, like I said, therapists. So we've seen almost, I would say, of the 120 something loans that we've done at CommunityWorks, I would see close to 40% of them have been some sort of sole proprietor of some sort.
All right, Stacy, any additional comments?
Totally. Yeah, I wouldn't add anything to that. There's nothing. There's absolutely money for sole proprietorships or partnerships. Every kind of business formation you can think of is qualified.
All right. Now, here's a bit of a curveball question. It did not appear in your scripts. So if there's $200 billion available for this program, and if those funds are not exhausted, what happens to those funds?
I think that's a question for Congressman Timmons.
Yeah. I mean, whether they would offer it in another program, that could be a possibility. I mean, we know that there's other resources and needs out there for small businesses. I mean, there could be that. I guess it's sort of it is a question mark to Stacy's point. We know there'll be other needs as businesses look to reopen, restart, and maybe modify their businesses. I mean, so I think that the resource is still going to be needed. It just may look a little bit different depending on how it's being accessed and utilized.
Well, I think the bottom line is, since those funds have been allocated and they are available, apply. If you haven't already done so, don't leave found money on the sidewalk.
That's right.
So the program is there. What I would hate to happen is for our friends in Washington to say, well, they didn't use this tranche of money. Why should we approve more?
That's right.
And so the moral of that story is apply and see what happens. But $200 billion, I know $200 billion does not go as far as it used to, but that still seems like quite a bit of money.
Well, and we need to get our share in the upstate, right? We need to get our fair share in Greenville County and for our business owners. So please, everybody that needs it, go apply.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think too, if for example, if Stacy or I can't help you, there may be your bank that you're working with. Definitely talk with them. There's several banks that are participating. I know that there's some that are not, possibly, but just make sure that we're a resource also if you want to try to work with your bank.
Good. That is great advice. As we come to the close of the program, we don't like to leave without extending a message of hope. I know where I was when everything started shutting down. Our office shut down on March the 17th, and we haven't officially reopened since then. And this has been quite the challenge. I can't think of any business that hasn't been challenged through this time. But I do see light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I saw a lot of folks partying this weekend at the beaches and at the bars, and those videos were a bit disturbing if from a health perspective. But our economy does seem to be reopening, and we do seem to be trying to get back on our feet, and so that's a good sign. We're going through the fire, but we're coming out tested, and I think we're going to be better as a result of this. If you all had a message of hope for businesses out there, what would that message be?
Well, I would tell everybody that, at Bank of America, we are just thrilled that we've been able to do the PPP program, and also can't tell you the untold thousands and millions of stimulus checks that have gone into our financial centers. And we had to close several financial centers because a lot of our employees are staying home because they have health issues. But I'm happy to tell you that now we're starting to open them back up. Our Spartanburg main office is opening back up today. We are seeing more activity when we look at credit cards and debit cards and Zelles and wires. All the activity hit a bottom, back in April, but now it's coming back. I'm going to get my hair cut today. So, everything.
Well, I may go get my hair cut today too, Stacy.
I know. But I think that there is hope, but I hope that everybody at the same time remembers we've got to keep social distancing, washing our hands, and because that's what really will keep things moving forward, is being careful. And so I have a lot of optimism about what's coming.
Yeah, I would agree with Stacy, and just I think to your point, Carlos, there was challenges. I mean, I know I was at CommunityWorks for the first 2 months, and then closing the office March 17th as well, and certainly. But I think one of the things that we've seen at CommunityWorks is that being at the front lines, and that we're honored to be in the community and be a resource, and that we worked really hard to respond quickly. By first looking at how we help our existing borrowers to modify their loans, just like everyone else was doing. But at the same time, being in that voice, that resource, somebody that they could call and contact. And we too were very interested in trying to participate in the PPP program because we knew it would be a benefit to the businesses that we serve, in particular our smaller minority women-led businesses that may not have the strongest relationship with their financial institution, that they've been working with us for some time. And so I think we're building deeper relationships with our small businesses. I think they've seen that we're here for them. So I think we are positive about trying to use these resources to make those improvements that they need. And I think it's been a coaching moment, right? I think in many cases, what we learned also, if our businesses weren't doing the right, collecting the right documentation for payroll, or maybe they weren't doing some things, we took that as a teachable moment, which is, this is some things that you should have maybe been doing, and now we can think about how we do that moving forward. And so, just taking those opportunities to educate our businesses as well.
Good. Great messages there. Thanks for sharing. And Stacy, Tammie, the birds and the dog, I want to thank you for joining us on today's Community Matters to discuss the PPP program. Valuable information that you shared. I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank our attendees for joining us today as well. A recording of today's session will be aired on the Greenville Chamber's website and sent to attendees along with a survey. So please complete the survey. It does help us and inform our decisions for future programming. And don't forget that this is part of an ongoing series. We hope you will join us next week for an update on the Greater Greenville Pledge, a new initiative recently launched to build confidence with our consumers and our businesses. And we'll have a great update for you next week on the Greater Greenville Pledge. Thanks everyone again for joining us today. Have a great day.